Welcome to the 13th grade. Today, I want to talk to you about your mind and how that will contribute to you becoming rich. Let's dive in. All right, guys. Thank you for joining me here, and hopefully you can bear with me as we go through this part of the course. This is really where we get into the meat of everything that we are going to be going over. If we remember, we talked about kind of the main categories. We're going to be going over your mindset, and then we'll talk about how you earn income, how you invest that income, and then of course how you do that sort of with taxes in mind, and of course building credit, so leverage. So we're kind of going through those things. We are still in this piece of mindset, mainly because the process to get there from A to Z is pretty easy. However, the biggest thing that I would say to you why people never end up achieving or hitting that financial freedom status is simply because of their mindset. And they just don't get there. And there's a couple of really good reasons why that actually is. And so it's very important we go over that, because if you understand as you go through this process, like, oh, I remember, Elliot mentioned to me that I was going to be feeling this particular way at this particular period, or, oh, I didn't realize that that is actually why I'm doing what I'm doing. It completely can change it. I would tell you without a doubt that the number one reason probably that people are successful, or people are not successful, is simply is this mindset piece, in that there is really no difference between those that achieve or don't achieve. Yes, there are some people out there that are smarter. Yes, there are people out there that have degrees, and those sorts. But we have countless examples, whether it be Mark Zuckerberg and people like that, that didn't necessarily go to college, that started businesses when they're in their 20s. And it was just about having the right mindset, having the entrepreneurial spirit, and deciding to push forward and sort of going against the grain. The difference between the 1% and 99% is that, like, 99% of the people think, act, approach money in a very specific way. And so if you are going to be the 1% by default, as I think we've covered a few times here, like, you are going to be doing different than everyone else around you. And so what that means also is, like, your mindset has to be different. You have to act and approach things completely differently. And it actually can be a very powerful thing, is when you understand why people are doing what they're doing, why they're taking the actions that they are. You can help. It can just be to your benefit in business and in doing deals, and just empathy and all those types of things. So, without further ado, now this is something I called. It's something I kind of came up with myself. So you're not going to see this anywhere else. If I was a TED talk, this would be my TED talk, if you will. And so just diving into it, there's a lot here. We're going to go over kind of each stage here, but this partly comes from a combination of, if you remember a few videos back, all the books that I've read. Some of those books that I've read have dived deep into mindset and why we do what we do, and vulnerability and shame. Had to, Dr. Brene Brown, and so just kind of putting this together, I began to realize exactly why we fail in relationships, and it is the same exact reason that we actually fail in business, and why it can be extremely difficult to do things later on in life, to where you do want to, if you're a young person right now and you're watching this, you do want to take those chances early on in your career, when some of these, it'll make sense to you in a second, but when some of these things, when it's just a little bit easier, just given where you are and your status in life and so forth. So what I would like you to do, before we get started, is I want you to think about the like, what would be complete true happiness for you. And this is a pretty good exercise. Like, I think you should really just take some time, pause the video or whatever, write things down, and really think about like what is true happiness. And I'm not necessarily talking about like, oh, I want to have a nice house, I'll have a nice car. I want you to think about what's the core of that, right? And so, and this is gonna be important too because we're gonna talk about what financial freedom, and this kind of ties into it. Again, extremely important. But and you may get it wrong, but just try. Like, what is it that if there was a feeling inside of you, like I would feel love or I would feel acceptance or whatever. What are the feelings that you would have that you think you would be in if you were in a state of abundance and you were like in like let's call it true happiness. So wherever you are, and I'm saying you're waking up every single day, you're blessed, you're happy, you're excited, just to be waking up, and like that's all is enough. And so then I want you to also think about once you've done that, I want you to think about sort of the opposite of that, right? And so, what are some of the characteristics of a person who is really just kind of living in a hell, right? Who is maybe not happy every single day? You know, they wake up, they don't necessarily get a sense of, they don't have a sense of purpose, maybe. Like what are some of those core things like you feel what, right? So if I'm happy, I'm feeling these things. And the characteristics of just the things in my life are these things. And then, you know, I'm struggling. So it's these things. And I'm not talking about, well, I'm upset because I can't put food on the table or I can't do any of those types of things. I'm talking about the feelings or personally inside. And I don't think I'm saying this right. So I want you to do that. Do the best you can. Pause the video, and then I want you to come back. And then we're gonna go over on the slide, and hopefully this makes sense to you a little bit. But I want you just to start to think about those types of things. Okay. So hopefully you guys didn't cheat and you did take the time to actually do this exercise. We're going to do a few things that are like this. It's very important you don't cheat and you actually do these exercises because the whole idea is that this is what's going to make make you think differently. Your mind is the number one thing that I have to change to make ensure that you are successful in your building wealth journey. And so going to the slides here, this is sort of what I've come up with. Some of this is psychology. Again, hat tip Dr. Brene Brown. But it's sort of on the top curve right here. What I put is, you know, sort of the top side of this is, you know, I can be when I'm excited, when I'm happy, I can be extremely and truly vulnerable around the people who I care about most. So think of a family, think of it a spouse, girlfriend, you know, it doesn't really matter, really, really great friend. But I'm most happy when I can be with those people and I can be vulnerable in the way that I know that I can speak to them and they're not going to be, you know, have judgment. So I can tell them, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. This is my problem. And they're not going to come back and be like, oh, you're weak, you know, whatever. They're not going to think of me differently from that. So true vulnerability is very important. And so correspondence with that, as I kind of just alluded to, when you feel accepted and right. And so what I mean by that is like, you know, you've done something, this is who I am. This is the raw, purest part of who I am. You know, you're seeing a lot of that self-expression, like, hey, I want to have, you know, tons of tattoos and blue hair. And, you know, people accept you for that. Like whoever it is that you are, like you're truly accepted for that. So one, I can be vulnerable. And then out of vulnerable, the people around me, the people I care most about can, you know, offer me or do offer me acceptance. And sort of what that allows you to do is if, you know, you can be truly vulnerable and those that are around you are accepting you, you end up kind of living the life like who you want to be, right? And so you are the purest form of who you are, okay? And we'll get to that more in a second, what that means. But just like whoever you think you are, you're quirky, you're funny, you're silly. You don't have to put up a facade. You're around your friends, you're around your family. You're not having to, you know, dress a certain way, act a certain way, or whatever. Like you're able just to be you, your most authentic self. And if sort of, you know, if you're able to be vulnerable and that vulnerability leads into acceptance and that sort of turns itself into like, you know, you're living the life where you want to be, you know, that ultimately is going to lead to, you know, sort of true happiness. So it's, you know, it's kind of that category. And so on the flip side of that, when I've been sort of the most frustrated, I don't say depressed, but like down on my luck or whatever, I'm very fearful of where I am in life or what comes next. I might be fearful of being vulnerable, right? So if I'm vulnerable, maybe I'm not fearful, right? Because I'm able to be vulnerable. If I'm fearful, I'm probably not vulnerable. So I'm keeping a lot of things in. I don't want to say anything, so I'm sort of internalizing everything. And the reason why I would do that is because my fear would be that if I say something or I do something, I'm going to be rejected. And so what ends up happening is you are fearful because you don't want to be rejected. You don't want to be, sort of ostracized, and you want to fit in because we all sort of need to fit in with the tribe, if you will. And so you end up living a life who sort of, I say, well, who you want me to be, but who others want you to be, or who society wants you to be. So that quirky, silly, person that you are, you can't be that because you're worried about people are going to laugh at you, or they're going to think you're weird or whatever, and you're not going to have friends or whatever. And regardless, what I would say to you is that even if you're then living this life of a person that that is not necessarily you, and you maybe get some sort of shallow acceptance, you do realize internally that that acceptance that you're getting from other people is an acceptance of a person that's not who you are. It's an acceptance of a person who they want you to be. And so that in itself can put you into what I call silent depression, which is something you don't necessarily realize, you don't dwell on it, but it is the thing that you wake up, and a lot of relationships break up this particular way, but you go into relationships and you realize, and you're like, listen, I was this particular way, and I'm just not me anymore. Like, I don't want to be with you. And you resent your partner because you're trying to live the life that you think your partner wants to be. And maybe they accept you for it. But like I just said, they're liking you a person that you don't even like who you are. And you just say at one point in time, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. And those are the relationships that are like really hard to even bond back together, because to come back together, to get out of that sort of silent depression, you have to then become who you want to be. And if you end up being who you want to be, and your partner's been living with something completely different, they're like, who is this person? You were never this person. You were always this person. And now we've broken up or whatever. Now we're separated. You're this crazy person. And I think that's a good example, in that you ever been in a relationship with somebody and then you break up, and then they end up seemingly are someone completely different, and you're like, who is this person? Like, I don't even know who that is. Like, she or he is completely gone off the rails. He's now doing this. That was them the whole time. They were just in fear. They were worried about you rejecting them. And so they end up being who you wanted them to be, which caused them depression. And eventually we will crack, we will break. We cannot live that way. Or if we are in a silent depression and we do live that, we're going to have low self-esteem. We can end up getting into addiction. And so what I mean by that is, like, you go to alcohol, you go like anything to sort of just break that cycle, right? And oftentimes there's a lot of blame that comes involved. So, I'm fearful for not wanting to be, or not want to do something, because I feel like I'm going to get rejected. So then I end up kind of becoming the person you want me to be. And now I'm depressed, I'm angry. I end up blaming that other partner because they're the person that's making me not be able to be vulnerable and be accepted. And they're the person that's making me sort of be where I'm at. So I'm going to blame them. So you're putting a lot of blame in other people. Hey, it's their fault. They're not doing it, and so forth. And so those are the two sort of, spectrums of that. And so I want to go into specifically, as I was just talking about, as an example of this, and then we'll get into the business example of this. But I think this is probably the one that most people are going to relate to, especially if you're young, is in the beginning of any romantic relationship, right? And so when I'm talking about romantic relationship, I'm talking about, you're out, you meet somebody at a club, at the bar, at the library, church, it doesn't really matter. But when you first meet them, in that first period of time, and this works really, really well with friends as well, like, you get to know each other, you're not emotionally invested, okay? in that particular person. Okay. And when I say, like, yeah, you might think they're attractive. You might think that, oh, they're, they're everything you want to be, they're successful or whatever, all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, in the very first parts of that relationship, you can be, uh, you're just your true self, right? Because there's nothing to hide. Like, if you date somebody for a couple of weeks and it doesn't work out, you kind of move on. It's not a big deal, which is very different than if you're in a relationship maybe for 5 or 10 years and you're into it. So if I was looking at, this chart, I would say, you're starting up here in sort of the corner. And in that beginning relationship, you can choose fear or vulnerability. I think in the beginning of any relationship, if you choose fear because you're worried about rejection, well, guys, the relationship never starts because you just never approached that person. You never told them you're interested or whatever. But when you become vulnerable and you're like, hey, man, I think you're, whatever, I think you're hot stuff. Let's go grab coffee or whatever. You show that little bit of vulnerability. And that person says to you, yeah, okay, yeah, let's do it. And then, you're starting on the first date and all of that is positive, right? You're starting on the first date, you feel accepted. And I would say for the most part in those beginning stages, you are being your most true self. You're being, because you're not a fear of rejection, because it just doesn't necessarily matter. Of course, for those that are out there going, oh, there's people that, they just fake it. They show their best self, and that's not who they are. And I get that, but what I'm saying to you is that if you're meeting a partner for the first time, you're okay with them saying, you know what, I like to do these things. These are my hobbies. These are my goals in life. And I take my own relationship with my wife. When we first met, she's like, degree is very important to me. I want to be a mother, stay-at-home mom, although she doesn't do that now. I want to, travel the world. The children are the most important to me. I am, if you're not interested in, traveling the world with me and you're not willing to put a significant amount of our income and our savings over the next, our lifetime, you're traveling, that we're not for one another. She's like, I'm always seeking, more knowledge and reading and self-help. And so I'm going to expect you to be doing that because like, we just won't have anything to have a conversation with. I want to build an empire. I want to, for me, just $80,000 a year isn't good enough in a small house. Like I want to see what I can build and build a legacy and build generational wealth for our kids. Like, so you're laying all that kind of stuff out, and to where you may not necessarily do that or be that vulnerable of this is who I am. Anyway, so the point is that as you're beginning in the start of a relationship, you can start to build, very early on, very vulnerable, because you could take it or leave it. It doesn't necessarily really matter. However, as the relationship turns from a friendship to kind of like you to then strong relationship to like, hey, I think I love this person. I think this is the person I want to be in. And as little things start to happen, maybe there's a hiccup, there's a small argument and things like that. That is where some fear can start to come in, because now you're emotionally invested. This is important. You're now emotionally invested. And early on, you weren't mostly emotionally invested. Now you're emotionally invested in this particular person. And so now, like in the case of my wife, in our beginning of a relationship, I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I'm now 3 years in, 4 years in. I kind of like this idea of me getting a career, getting a job, being a boss chick out there. I don't really want to stay at home. You're changing. You're doing something else. I don't know if I want to mention that because my role is a stay-at-home mom. I don't know how he's going to accept it. And just there's all different kinds of things relationship. For making this short, you can imagine that as you go through relationship, you start to go, hey, this is who I am. I'm changing. I'm evolving. Relationships that are healthy, those individuals are able to say, hey, I know I was here. Now I'm there. Now this is how I feel. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to go. They're okay with being vulnerable because they know their partner's going to have acceptance for them, because maybe the core values are still the same. That person's going to offer them reinforcements. Like, you want to go be a real estate agent? Like I said to my wife, absolutely, go do it. Like, go kill it. You'll probably be awesome at it. And when you give that reinforcement, That allows them to go, oh, okay, well, I'm going to be more vulnerable to you. So imagine you go in and you say to somebody, I'm going to be vulnerable with you for a second, and you hurt my feelings. And that person says to you, hey, I apologize. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. I was inconsiderate. Actually, I was just kind of grumpy that particular day. You know, I only had the kindness for you. I apologize. I'm sorry. Give me a hug. I'll be more conscious of it. And when I'm frustrated, I'll make sure I relay that information to you so that if I seem that way to you, you'll understand that it's not you. It's just something I'm going through. Imagine getting that response. Or imagine you going up to someone saying, hey, you did something and that really upset me. And them going, well, it is what it is. Like, if you can't handle it, you can't handle it. Right. Those are two completely. One is a rejection of your vulnerability, being like, I don't really care about your feelings. The second one is an acceptance of your vulnerability and saying, taking ownership of that person saying, and that's reinforcement. You're going to go back to that person if they do something again and be vulnerable. The other person that rejected you or told you to go pound sand, you're probably not going to, right? And so relationships happen like that. As you become more attached or more involved in relationship, now I'm married, now I have kids, there's all kinds of things that are linked together. It's harder for you to become vulnerable unless you're getting that positive reinforcement. It's harder for you to get that to become vulnerable because you're so involved that you're actually more fearful, because in the beginning relationship, if you were vulnerable and you did what you said you're going to do and they left you, who cares? No big deal. It doesn't necessarily really matter because you're not really attached to them, right? You just thought they were hot and cute or whatever. But if you're married and have three kids, now it actually means a little bit something more, because me becoming vulnerable, getting rejected, them seeing me differently, maybe they're not going to think I'm hot anymore. Maybe they're not going to think I'm whatever. That can result in divorce, which is a tragic, tragic thing. So hopefully it kind of makes that sense to you a little bit without dragging on and spending like, this is actually like just a 4 hour conversation. Without going into that, we're going to stop there. So now I want to talk to you about the same kind of principle, but I want to talk to you about that principle as it relates to business. Okay. Same thing. If you are in, and if I could just recap the personal side, if you're in a relationship and you become vulnerable with your significant other, and every time you're vulnerable, they reinforce you by saying, thank you for being vulnerable. I respect you. I have empathy, and let's move forward. Or, whatever it is, it's a positive thing. You're giving reinforcements. You will continue to be vulnerable. And if you continue to be vulnerable, you're going to feel accepted by your partner. You're going to be more likely to live your true self or who you want to be. And you're going to more likely be in true happiness. If you're with your partner and you become vulnerable and they tell you to go pound sand, they don't like the new who you are. You used to dress this way, like a little sexy hot chick, and now you're more like dressed like a mom or whatever. And they're kind of tearing you down, and rejecting who the person is that you want to be. You end up become someone else. You can end up molding yourself to being who they want you to be because you're fearful of them breaking that relationship. And that relationship is important because you're married and have kids and whatever. You will end up being someone who will want to be. You will roll into a silent depression, and you will wake up 5, 10 years down the road and be like, I'm done. I'm over it. And it just can't be. In business, it's actually very similar to that, but the ramifications of it can be 10x to your income. So, for example, when you begin a job, and I get it, every time that people start a new job, they're like, well, I'm not very vulnerable. I'm first there. I don't want to speak up. So let's say you're in your first 90 days, whatever, you get past that period, but you're new into a position, right? And you're not married yet. You're in your 20s. You just got out of college or whatever, and you're starting your new position. When you go into a position, if you are, because you're not fearful of losing that job, because maybe you can just go get another one, right? You can be vulnerable in the way that, not like in a personal relationship, but you can be vulnerable. And I'm going to use my own example here. Is had no problem going to a boardroom, and I might be sitting with different executives or my managers and things like that. And we would be talking about data or something that's going in the business. And I would have no problem saying to somebody, yeah, I don't agree with that. I don't think that's correct. mainly because it's like, hey, you hired me here to give you my input because you saw something in my experience, right? But I'm like, I don't understand. Like, no, I don't agree with this. I'm not gonna, no, no, this is the wrong direction. If we do this, it's going to be big problems for the company, right? And so I would be vulnerable because I wasn't necessarily worried about the outcome. Like if my manager was like, hey, you're going against my ideas or whatever, I don't like you, get out of the company. Yeah, it sucks to lose a job, but I don't, but it's like, whatever, I'll just go find a new job. It doesn't really matter. And early on in my career, I'm probably thinking like, I'm going to be here for 2 years and I'm going to use this job to go for somewhere else for 2 years. I'm going to pop around anyway. So if we're not a good fit, that's wasting my time. I'm here to make an impact so I can get promoted. If I can't make an impact, I'm not going to do it. So you're vulnerable early on in business. If when you're in those meetings, you say, hey, I don't agree with this. This is what happens. And your boss gives you reinforcements and he goes, hey, I like your input. I like your ideas. I think you're a little bit off here because of this. Your experience is a little bit new or you're newer to company, whatever, but keep bringing it. Keep bringing all the fire because that's why I hired you. You're going to continue to keep doing that. If you get pulled aside after the meeting and the boss says, hey, you can't bring up and things like that and whatever. If you need to have a discussion, you have to do it behind closed doors, like, and just kind of completely rejects you giving input. Then obviously you're going to do that less. So hopefully that makes sense. If in the same way is if you're becoming vulnerable, you're getting acceptance, they keep encouraging or they take your ideas and you run with it, you will end up being or reaching not who you want to be, you will reach the full potential of your offering to that particular company, right? So you might have really good ideas, be exceptionally good at, say, marketing, for example. But if you're unable to give or contribute because you're not willing to be vulnerable because you keep getting rejected, your amazing ideas never come to the front. You never expand, you never grow, and you never reach the top parts of the business, right? We'll call that true happiness, but we'll say that successful in a company. On the contrary, like if you are constantly rejected, you're just not really going to do anything. You're just going to be a seat and you're just going to be sitting in business. You probably will never advance because nobody knows your talent because you're not really showing your talent because every time you do, you keep getting rejected from it. So that positive reinforcement is actually extremely important. Now, to business, this is going to jump and it's going to tie into later chapters where we talk about the careers that you select and how you go about business, how financial security can make you just an absolute monster in the business. And by having financial security, you will be far more successful in business, which will then contribute to higher salaries, higher income, and make you even more successful. So the rich continue to get richer because they have the security, okay, of their wealth to fall back on that they can be vulnerable in business. Let me say that again in a different way. If you are poor and you have no money whatsoever and you start a new job and you need that particular job, you are less likely to contribute into the boardroom or contribute into or become vulnerable for the fear of being rejected, just like in a personal relationship. Because if your manager doesn't like what you're saying because they're rejecting or whatever it is, you lose your job, you are out income, and you are in serious financial trouble. You could lose your house, you could lose, be homeless, whatever it is, right? So having $0 doesn't give you the gift of being financially vulnerable or vulnerable in the boardroom because you need that job. That would be very similar as if you first started dating and you you could kind of take it or leave it because there's plenty of guys that are out there, right? But once you kind of get married and you get committed, it's different, right? If you're financially secure, meaning, I don't know, maybe your bills are $5,000 a month and you have $100,000 in your bank account, you can go into business and you can be like, hey, your ideas suck. It doesn't necessarily make any sense. If we do these particular things, it's going to cause big issues for the company. You shouldn't do those things. And if your manager rejects you, you don't care. You get fired. You're sitting at 100 grand. You just go find another job, someone that does value you. The reason why that's important, hopefully that makes sense to you. Let that sink in. The reason why that's is important is that contribution and vulnerability leads to you being the best employee you possibly can, which leads to higher income, bigger impact, bigger salaries, bigger positions, your expansion in knowledge and education. It all snowballs. Guys, this is why the rich continue to get richer. This is why the successful continue to get successful. This is why people, if you're in a business, some people get promoted and some people don't. It's their vulnerability and it's their contribution. Some people contribute, some people don't. That doesn't necessarily mean that one person can't, they just don't. And a lot of that is your ability to be vulnerable, not to worry about shame, because at the end of the day, you have the support of either I can lose a job or it doesn't really matter to you. And there's a number of other things, right? Experience, education, which we get into. So example of this is I entered a company, and I was coming from a private company that I was basically operating as a president for. My official position was vice president. We'd built the company. I left that company, built another company, had built my own company, kind of all in the same field. But let's just say I had mastered sales, marketing, customer service, UI, website design. Like I've mastered all of that. And so one of the challenges I want in my life is I said, I want to get out of the private sector and I want to go into a publicly traded company, Fortune 500, because up to that point, I'd really kind of worked with like just private companies. And I said, I want to go join the big boys. I want to join a big major corporation and see, while I'm having great impact at a private company, will it translate to a larger company and what could I get to? Like, because obviously there's a lot more pay packages that are there. And so when I went to this company, I started out and the person that hired me put me in a position, and it was kind of an entry level position, to be honest with you. It was like I took like 19 steps back, and he was like, "Go do this thing, this little task." And I ended up spending about 6 months at this company playing solitaire, like no question. Actually, just sitting and playing solitaire every single day, hanging out. Not TikTok, I guess it wasn't at the time, but Twitter, just playing around. I was trading, doing different things. At certain point, I become frustrated because the team that I was leading and things like that were all doing successful, blowing out all the numbers, doing crazy, but I wasn't getting the advancement. And the point is I knew that I could do much better than I was. I knew my past history. And again, I joined this company specifically because I wanted to get advancement at a higher level. I walked into my boss, having financial security in my back. At that point in time, I had private companies, I had sold the companies, I had plenty of money in the bank account. And I walked in and I said, listen, if you don't give me something to do, I'm not coming to work tomorrow. And so imagine going into your boss. And when I say going into your boss, I'm not talking about your direct boss. I mean, I went like 4 layers up to like a rung under the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And I said, listen, if you don't give me something to do, I'm not coming in tomorrow. So wait. He's like, okay. He's like, He literally said to me, I've been waiting for you to ask me for more. I know you can do more. I hired you for a higher role. However, I didn't want you to come in for that role immediately. I wanted you to learn from the ground up and get clout with the people in the ground level before we moved you. The next day, he came in, he took my role and expanded it let's say I had 5 different, one department, I was 5 different departments. And I had taken that and over the course of like 6 to 8 months, completely killed all those departments. Numbers went up 100%, whatever. From there, the person kept giving me more and more business. I kept being successful. So where does this come in? One, if I had not had the financial backing, I definitely would have went into my boss and said, if you don't give me something to do, if you don't advance me, I'm not coming in. The boss accepted that because bosses want people to take on more. And I had proved myself in my current role. So he was like, yeah, okay, great. I'll give you more. I ended up during that initial period making friends with some people that were kind of lower level managers at my level. I ended up being their boss, which made them extremely frustrated because they had been with the company for like 9 years and I had been with the company for like 8 months and I was already leading what they wanted to lead. Every time I went into a boardroom, because of the boldness of that first conversation, how well it was received by the boss, every time I went into a boardroom, to a meeting, I would bring in my own data, my own stuff, and I would say to them, listen, You're wrong. This is what's right. This is, or, obviously if they're right, I would say that's right. I wasn't just combative all the time, but I was willing to go in and be vulnerable and to actually make impact by saying, these are the things that are incorrect. These are the things the company's doing wrong. These are the things that you, manager, you're not seeing, but I'm bringing in my experience. Maybe we could do it this way. There's ways to have that conversation so it's not offensive and all that. That's a whole nother course, whole nother world. By doing that, I was able to advance to a senior vice president of this particular company, stock options, all that kind of stuff, and completely destroy the people that had been in there for that long that were equally kind of doing okay in their business. The problem is that those individuals and those other managers, when we went into the room, they never spoke up. They never said anything. If the boss said, "Hey, what do we think about this direction?" They would say, "Yep, sounds good. Let's do it. Let's tackle it. How can I help you tackle this?" But they never said, "Hey, I like these ideas. I'm concerned with number 3 or 4. Let's tweak those." And that's what leaders value. Leaders do not want somebody that's going to come in and yes them. Leaders want respectful pushback, bringing with data, right? And they want that. So I continue to advance because I offer the leaders what they were looking for because I was willing to be vulnerable because it didn't matter to me, even if after being in the job and leading all those teams or whatever, still, even to the moment I left, I was with the company 4 years or something like that. I still would say to somebody, this person's not right for the company. This is what they're doing. Like I just was a bulldog all the way all the way down. And it got me to the highest ranking I could possibly go. I couldn't go higher unless I was board of directors, and I won't get into it, but you just can't get to that level. You have to, there's other things. So the reason why I was able to do that is because I was vulnerable, I got acceptance, and I was able to then shine and do whatever. If in business you don't do those things, if you don't provide value, and value is by speaking up, contributing, respectively saying, "Hey, you're wrong here, let's do this," and offering solutions and so forth. If you're just a yes man in a business, you're never going to go where in business. When I started off in that position, I think I made 72,000. When I left that position, I was getting bonuses of 150,000. Okay. And I won't even go into my salary and all of that. The people that started with me that had been there for 9 years were still in the same position, still struggling to make a couple of dollars, right? The only difference wasn't my skin, wasn't because I was a male. It wasn't because when I was in a boardroom, I said this and I contributed. And I was able to do that because I was able to be vulnerable. And the reason I was able to be vulnerable is because I had the financial backing. Again, and I'll recap for you. The reason why financial success is so damn important, and the reason why some people get richer and richer and richer, is because as you become more rich, you have the ability to take risks. Risk is a vulnerability. You have the ability to go in things because if it fails, it doesn't matter because you have a big nest egg to rely on. Hopefully that makes sense. This is going to be very important as we go into the future, and as we sort of tie these things together, right? Now, let's talk, okay, about how what allows you to become vulnerable, right? So how do you become vulnerable? How do you know what to contribute? And so if you look on the chart here, I say the privilege of vulnerability or the privilege of your mindset, which comes from education, or experience or study, or wealth, so risk tolerance. Okay. And so this is, again, very, very important. So please, guys, bear with me. If you are going to a company and you know you need to be vulnerable, you know you need to contribute, you need to make impact, but you've never done the position before, it's pretty hard to do that. So, however, if you went to and got an education and you just graduated from Harvard University, like a Harvard, you think about like a Harvard University attorney, they go into a firm, they're like, I'm making an impact. I'm graduated, umma cum laude, whatever, from Harvard University. Like I'm smart, I get education. That allows you some strength in the privilege of your mindset, right? Because that education makes your mind go, yes, I can contribute. I'm smart, I'm intelligent, I'm from Harvard, right? self-esteem, you want to call that, bravado, whatever it is, right? Education. The other way you can get sort of the strength to be vulnerable is through experience, or I say study, education, but experience of something. So in real estate, we are wildly successful in real estate. Part of the reason why we're wildly successful is because we've done so many transactions. Our real estate agent that does 5 transactions a year is just simply not going to be as good as one that does 15 to 20 transactions a month. Okay. And so if you are an auto mechanic, or you're a plumber, or whatever, and you've been doing something for 15, 20 years, you can pretty confidently go in and say, listen, I've been doing this for 15 years. This is what it is. Just like I was in the boardroom. Listen, I came from a private company. This is exactly what we did. This is the results that we got. This is how it worked. You guys aren't doing this. This is the exact fail that I saw at the private company. If we do this at the public company, you're going to be successful. That result ends up being successful. That ends up in a promotion. That comes from experience, or maybe from education. I might have gotten some kind of study, right? And then the other side of that is just simply wealth, willing to take a risk. And I just covered that, but your risk tolerance. So it's like the combination of those things. When we spoke about earlier, I think it was video 4 or something like that, about compressing time, where we get out of school, right? You have education, and then you start to do, right? So then you're going to experience of it. You're doing all of that as quickly as you possibly can, so that it gives you the strength to then make big moves, make contributions, or whatever. If at the same time in your 20s, you are also building wealth and building a nest egg, we'll talk about that, or not earning a earn and consume lifestyle, but you actually are saving and investing. So when you go into the boardrooms and you got the education, you got a little bit of experience, but then you also have wealth behind you, meaning I can take it or leave it in this job, you can then go in and make mass contributions at 28, 29, and 30, be taking director and VP roles in your mid to early 30s, and be presidents and CEOs and whatever in your 40s, when other people around you that either didn't have the wealth, so they don't want to necessarily take the risk, or they maybe they got some part of an education, but they didn't really try that hard, so they just kind of got in, they just kind of graduated, and then when they started their job, they didn't really really try to dive in, experience as much, and learn as much, and expand their knowledge as much. They could be 40 and still be a manager. And that's what happened at the publicly traded company that I was at. Is I came in and I had an immense amount of knowledge because I worked at a private company, and we worked all the time, and I was right with the CEO. So and I had to know everything, or else I wasn't going to be there. Private companies were completely different than publicly traded companies. You can't hide there. You got to know your junk. So tons of experience, tons of extra study. I still had an education from coming from school, but then I also had wealth because I was saving my money, that when I went into the company, my ability, like I compressed time so much, because what normally takes people just because they're limping along and doing a little bit, they're not willing to do big leaps. They're just kind of making small little ones. I was able to make big impact. In the same way, in real estate, in our business today, we come across the deal. We can pretty much look at a couple of pictures, look at some numbers, and go, "Yep, I do it. Let's do it." Without that means we're able to put offers in way before people. We're able to put more risk in for people. We have wealth, so if we get something wrong, that's perfectly fine. We're just able to do more, and because we're able to do more, because we can act fast, because of our experience, because we have like a nest egg, so we can willing to take risk, because we have an education, we're pushing. We're able to make bigger deals, and that contributes. If you go through life, and we're going to kind of end it here, but if you go through life and you don't take risk because you don't want to be vulnerable, because your fear of loss. I'm not going to have money. I'm not going to have a job. I'm never going to get a girlfriend. She's not going to agree with me. Because of rejection, you end up kind of not being the person that you can be, the best person that you are. You will kind of move along forever. However, if you can set yourself up by putting yourself in positions of being vulnerable first, probably with people that you know, and getting that acceptance, and realizing that as you become vulnerable, even if people don't accept you, it's okay. But living your best and truest self is going to contribute to true happiness and your most success, you'll be successful. Said it in a different way because I didn't do that well. The most successful people in life, the people that become our leaders, aren't don't even don't even worry about acceptance. And what they do is they say, I'm going to go make videos as a real estate agent, and I bet you they're going to suck. And people in the comments are going to say, I suck. And all the agents are going to say, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm such a rookie. I'm a loser. And that in itself is you becoming vulnerable, going, I'm going to, like this video, I'm going to create videos like this. I'm going to be boring. I'm going to be dry. And people are going to say, nobody's going to watch your videos and they're boring and they need a hook and they need all this kind of stuff. And you go, I don't really care because I'm not worried about you're getting rejected, right? But you say, I don't need that acceptance to keep going because I realize that if I am my true self, all I need to do, I'll become the best person I am. And at 330 million people, if I can get 1% of the people that are just like me to pay attention, that's all that matters. I won't get into politics and celebrities and stuff like that, but there are people that are out there that you can look, and actually a lot of celebrities are like this, and you're like, bro, they're weird, they're wild, they're crazy. Like they dress crazy, they act crazy, they do crazy stuff. They're actually not crazy. They're the most natural person that they are. They're their true self. They got pink hair, they wear crazy glasses, they dress a certain way. They just don't care. They are them true self. Because of that, that's electric. That brings people to them, and that's what makes them successful. If you don't end up being your true self because you're worried about what other people are going to think, what other people are going to say, what other people are going to whatever, it's going to be extremely hard for you to be successful in anything. The best most people do right now in society is they kind of contribute a little bit. They kind of get like, okay, and they just do the bare minimum to sort of just kind of get by, right? The most successful people in life are quirky, they're weird, they got orange hair, they're say what they want to say on stage. I'm thinking about just recently, Elon Musk was like, "What are people going to say? They're not going to advertise an X because you're saying these things, and they're going to take offense." And he was just like, "F off." I don't really care. That's him being his true self. That's why he's successful. He's not that way because he's successful. He's successful because he's that way. I'll get into politics. Donald Trump is crazy. He talks different. He looks different. He's kind of quirky. He's memorable because he's not a shell like everyone else. If you are just a cookie cutter of everyone else, you're unmemorable. You're not going to be successful. If you are unique, different, whatever, think of the people you follow on social media. They're all different, unique, they're interesting. Nobody wants to follow and experience the same guy, neighbor next door. He's not interesting, right? Goes to work, comes back, nothing. It's not interesting. We follow unique, different people. We follow people being them true self. If I can leave something with you, if you can find out a way to be your true self in your personal relationships, in business by contributing, in just being whoever it is that you are, you will be by far more successful than everyone around you. You will be seen as an outsider. You will be seen as the 1%. You will be going against the grain. People will be like, he's weird or whatever. But if you can shut off your need to be accepted when you become vulnerable, which is acting like your true self, lights out, forget it. You will be tremendously successful beyond your wildest dreams, regardless of the principles you put in your place, because the impact of that is 10x everything else. Until next time.